And we looked around. It's kind of all of the usual suspects, if you will, like all the normal, beer, brewery, branding companies, and couldn't really find anybody that we thought would be a great fit if you could get anybody to actually respond back to you.
Yeah.
So we ended up actually using a local firm that's a brand marketing firm. They didn't have any craft beer experience. They had a lot of beverage and food and beverage experience. So we hired them. It was not cheap. It's a 5-digit number to do what they call a brand evaluation. And so it was honestly one of the most eye-opening things we've ever done. Right. I really recommend it to everybody. Like, the money sucks. I get it. But spend the money and do it. Because what they did was very interesting. It's like they come in, pretending that you don't really have a brand. Right. And so they arrive and okay, let's figure out, what your mission statement actually is. Like, things that sound corny, right? Like, what's your motto? What's your mission statement? What's your, what's the this? What's the that? How do you view your brand? They ask you these questions like, who do you think your competitors are, right? Because in craft, we all like to think we're one big happy family and we don't actually have competitors, but of course we do. They ask you who you think your competitors are. And they have these sliding scales where they're between traditional and contemporary, where do you think your brand falls? And between, cutting edge and reliable, where do you think your brand falls? So they ask you all these crazy questions. But then they go out in the market, and this is actually what you're paying them for, is there's this concept in the marketing world that they call marketing personas, where they basically describe an archetype of an individual that is going to be in the market buying beer in some context, at a bar, at a restaurant, at a liquor store, convenience, grocery, all that kind of stuff. And they actually went in the market and acted out those personas.
Wow.
In those contexts, and got feedback directly from the people that they're speaking to, from the beer guy at the Total Wine, or the bartender at a bar or something like that, right? So they collect all of this data, and then they present you what's basically a gap analysis, which is here's where you think your brand is, and here's where your brand really is.
Sure.
And here are some recommendations that we have for how to close that gap, or how do you knowing what you know now about your brand, how do you want to shape it into the future? Is it you want to aim where you thought it was, or now do you want to go in a completely different direction? And I will tell you that you got to have a pretty thick skin to get that feedback, especially if you're, if you founded your own brewery and you've done the bootstrapping thing, right? You have to have a pretty thick skin to get that feedback, because your brand is not where you think it is. It's not. And you can, if you're not a marketing professional, I'm an engineer, right? So you kind of think about things like sales and marketing as kind of these soft topics. These are actual professionals. There's 100% a profession and a skill behind marketing. And so when you have somebody look at your brand completely objectively from the outside in, with none of your sweat equity and personal bias kind of built in, you can hear a lot of stuff that you really don't want to hear. But it's ultimately very, very, very good. Yeah. Right? It helps you confront some issues in the market that are great. The advice that we got from them was, our brewery, we are scientists and engineers here. That's who we are, right? We've got molecular biology PhDs to food scientists to me, I'm a chemical engineer, to you name it, it's who we are. And they're you have this kind of interesting, cool nerd kind of angle to your brand, but you don't really own it. You're kind of playing around the edges of it. Right. So if you're going to do that, then you need to dive in head first, and you got to own that whole niche. Right. Yeah. And so they recommended some things our Atom logo changed. It used to be a thin line, basic, 2D kind of Atom thing. And they recommended that we change it to this sort of more active, bolder, more easily discernible when it's printed on a label. Adam logo. They recommended that we change the font on the Alementary, the text logo, right? Like they recommend all of these things. It's kind of funny. We joke about it here. It's like you don't know how many places your logo is actually on until you have to change them all. And then it's like, it's everything from coasters to the side of the van, right? It's like, it's everything. But you end up in this, in ultimately this better place. So, when it comes to like that topic of marketing, all of my brewery friends around here, I recommend this to them without hesitation. Like, you need somebody you don't know. You need somebody who is not already biased by the industry. You need somebody to just do a cold evaluation, like go to a brand marketing firm, have them do the evaluation, and see what you get back. And in our case, we got back a ton of awesome information that we've been acting on. That was 2.5 years ago we did that.
Oh, wow.
And we've been acting on that information for the past 2.5 years. So it was good for us.
Do you think that information has changed in the 2.5 years, though?
So no, because yes, but no. So it's really an issue of, in our case, when it was really like command your brand, command your market, this is what you need to do. Like we're more in control over our messaging now. Than we ever have been, right? Like we did actually put effort into, things that are kind of, not a lot of people put effort into them, like actual sales cards, right? Like not just here's a Word doc list of all the things that we have on offer this week, but like actual proper sales cards, right? Point of sales materials, these sorts of things. So some of that information has changed. I will say that when we got out in the market and started taking some of this to heart, their list of competitors for us was very different from our list of competitors for us. And as we got out in the market and started making some changes, we were like, yeah, they were right. Like we were not, we weren't seeing ourselves in the right crowd, in the same crowd of competitors. So I don't think that has really changed. The pandemic year slowed all that down, right?
Yeah.
So this is really our first year of being, I think, full force in market where people are actually, at least in our geography, out and about now more than they have been at any time since the pandemic. So we'll see how it plays out this year. But, over 2.5 years, it seems to have held up pretty well.
Wow. So what size were you at? Like, how much were you getting out into the market at the time to be like, this is where we need to be to justify the cost to do this? Because this seems to be obviously an outward, off-premise or at least an on-premise retail type of marketing strategy. Yeah.
So in our case, it was very much twofold, right? Like everybody else, we split our sales practice into kind of two chunks. We've got what we call our inside sales, which is, tap room, retail, that sort of thing. And then our outside sales, which are our distribution volume. So at the time when we did this, we were running at about, call it 4,000 barrels a year, roughly, something like that. About 750 of which goes through our tap room. So that was kind of the split where we were. When the pandemic hit, we sort of were like, now the market is very confusing, right? So consumer habits are changing. Who knows when they're going to go back or how they're going to go back. And so that was really the driver for us, was to be like, we kind of had this feeling that going forward, the market is going to be forever changed. So let's do everything we can do to position ourselves to capitalize on whatever that new market is. So in our case, the study really addressed both things, which was, what does the brand look like in our local community, like the orbit of people who come here to us. So I think that sort of thing is applicable for basically anybody that has a tap room. Like our tap room was running, like I say, 700 barrels a year. That's I think it's right at the national average. I think national average is like 750 or 752 or something like that. So, we're not big or small, I think, from a national perspective when it comes to the tap room, especially in New Jersey, where we're not allowed to sell food or do anything fun or interesting. So that was one portion of the study, and that resulted in some things like some renovations in the tap room, right? Like basic things like repainting the bathroom to tell a better brand story, or getting a nice neon sign and a green wall installed and all this stuff to create a different environment. In our case, it led us to keep things like table service and host service, which no New Jersey brewery had before the pandemic. And then we were mandated to do that. And as it turns out, it's very on brand for us. So we kept those positions. On the distribution side of things, that takes a little longer to realize, right? Because you're talking about product in market. Pull-through rates in liquor stores were impossibly low for a long time because more people started canning that weren't canning before. And so I would say just now those things are starting to bear fruit because we've had this brand in the market in its new form for almost 2 years. And so we are seeing, pull-throughs on a steady climb. We're starting to see reorders on a steady climb. It's impossible to say that that's expressly because of this branding exercise, but I think it definitely had a positive impact on it.
Being able to want to put that money forward, what made you want to do it? And why was it important? Was it a fact that you knew you needed to grow in this aspect, or was it something that where did you get the idea, I guess?
Yeah, so here we Michael and I run an exercise every year, basically in the first quarter of every year, where we reevaluate basically everything that we do, all of our supplier relationships, everything, right? So like, I want to know, like, okay, we've been buying cans from this, particular company for a year. What do we like? What do we not like? Let's send some things out to bid, see what our pricing looks like. Just make sure we're doing the right thing all the time, right? We do that with malt. We do that with hops. We do that with, packaging, raw materials, corrugated, all that stuff. So we're in the habit of that kind of yearly evaluation of many, many, many aspects of our business. Then we're actually on our way back from a distributor meeting in Pennsylvania, and we were like, do we need to, we keep hearing all this stuff about how we need more POS materials, we need more of this, we need more of that. How do we figure it out? How do we know what is the body of what's that? So we started just from that point, and we were like, okay, so is now the time? We've been operating this brand at the time for 5 years. And we bootstrapped everything. We did all of our own social media. We did, we in-house graphics design. We do everything, right? Here, we do it all ourselves. So it was just sort of natural for us to be like, we've been doing this for 5 years and we've never even thought about it. We just assumed it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And we evaluate all the other aspects of our business annually. So maybe now is just a good time. So it was literally that idea, which was, we were being asked for things from a distribution partner that we didn't know how to provide them. A better brand story, better materials, all of this. And so we were like, well, how do you start, right? And so we were kind of naive about it. We were like, we called this company up and we said, we want you to do sales materials. And so they thought they were coming in to do sales materials, and they were like, wait a minute, you don't actually have a brand here. You don't have a brand package. You don't have the things that we need in order to actually build the sales materials you're asking us for. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we were like, shit, we need all that stuff, right? I guess, we needed, what's a motto? I don't know. We make beer. It was that sort of a thing, right? And so that's where the better drinking through science came from, and all of that is all from that same thing.
You talked about having a thick skin. What were some of the things that were the big ouches for you guys that, those gaps that you thought you had something for one thing and it really was completely different? And do you feel that maybe there's a lot of breweries that have those type of gaps too?
Yeah, one of the things that we heard, and we were like, well, this is just the state of the craft beer industry, is one of the first items of feedback they had was, you have to make it easier for people to figure out what's in the can. right? Like if you want consumers to pull something off of the shelf, right, and you go to your average Bottle King or Total Wine or name your chain, right, you're asking somebody to look at this sea of enormous things in front of them and identify your brand and then choose to pull that off the shelf, right? And so you know how craft is, right? People get crazy with these labels, right? And you can spend all day looking at labels and being like, I looked at every word on the label and I still have no idea what's in the can, right? There's like this tribal knowledge that you're supposed to have, right? Because you're like in the craft beer. And a lot of craft beer fans have that tribal knowledge, so they know that, oh, that art is from the whatever brewery, right? And that's that crazy mushroom stout or whatever it is, right? But that's not beer consumers in general. That's a very small segment of people, right? So taking a can like that and putting it into market, okay, but like if you present something to a consumer where they can identify it's yours, figure out what's in the can, and keep that ultimately as consistent as you possibly can, that's sort of the secret to brand pull through, right? And so I was like, nah, they can't be this way. It can't possibly be this way. And so you look at other breweries that do a really good job of it, right? And you go, wow, what's the consistency, right? Like, what are we like up by us, Carton Brewing, right? Like, you know, you look at their cans, you're like, what is it about that can that makes it work? And you're like, well, it's identifiable. You know exactly whose it is just by looking at it. And, they make it very easy to figure out what you're buying, right? It's like nothing is hidden from you, right? Yeah. And so for us, you know, we had sort of dipped this toe in the water, right? Where we were saying like, oh, let's be the cool kids and do some crazy can art. But ultimately that doesn't get you what you want, right? Like if you're selling things out of a tap room, it maybe works. But certainly if you go out into distro, you gotta make it easier for the consumer to know what's happening.
Because you spent the money to do this knowing you probably were going to have to spend more money to do new things, or did you not know?
It was a lot more.
Yeah.
No, it was a lot more money, but they're implementing it are all things you can do incrementally, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the things that our company helped us with was like, hey, you don't have to throw away. You've got 1 million coasters sitting in the closet. You don't have to throw those away, right? Go ahead and use them. It's fine. Just when you order again, you know, put the new information, new logo, all the new things on there, right? Like merchandise, don't go throw away all your merchandise, like sell through it. It's fine, right? Sell it as like, you know, the vintage Alementary logo or whatever, you know, you change the logo, make it desirable. But it was just, so I would say it was, I don't actually have a number for that because it was like, it's 1,000 little tasks over 2 years to get everything like properly implemented. But I would say the sum total of all of that is probably more than the exercise itself, but it's not a check that you write, right? That changes everything sort of magically all at once. It's just adaptations over time, right?
Yeah.
Koozies, coasters, sales materials, you know, the wrap on the Vix ended up shrinking our number of yearly SKUs that we offer as part of that exercise as well. And that was really like the in-depth analysis that our marketing company did was not only as for the Alementary brand as a whole, dive into each individual product and be like, what is this product? And is this on brand? Like, is the name on brand? Is it the right voice? Is the story about the product in the new voice of Alementary, not the old voice of Alementary? So all of that was part of the study, right?
Yeah.
And they were, our best-selling product was called Hackensack Lager, and so they recommended a brand name change. They wanted to call it the original Hackensack Lager, and you're like, well, why is that? Well, because graphically you can make original and lager really big, and you can make the Hackensack part really small, so the people who need to see it have it there. But when you look at it on the shelf, you basically just see original lager. Alementary original lager is what you see, right? Even though that's not the full brand name. So rebranding a core like that is a big deal. That's a big deal, right? Because if you buy labels in bulk, you might have 100,000 of them sitting in a label storage, right? So that's a big deal to get all that changed. They helped us with another one of our brands. We have a flagship IPA called A Game, and one of the interesting bits of feedback that we got from them was that craft people think the flagship is dead, quote unquote, right? You heard that for years, right? Through 2018, 2019, everybody's like, oh, flagship beers are dead.
Right.
Part of their study was, in the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, the flagship is back. They predicted that, at least in our immediate geography. I think they're correct. Because people are they want a sure thing. They want something they know. They want something they can grab quickly, and have it be reliable. So that impacts price point, impacts all kinds of things. So it's a very comprehensive study, right? I wouldn't want to give anybody the impression that it was just about a motto and a font change on a logo. It's a brand study is a lot deeper than that, right? Like we have a flagship IPA called Aware in our logo, and they're like, one of the struggles that we've always had is that the A Game recipe I think we're on version 30, moving target. So it's a flagship that we've always done, but it's never exactly been the same.
Sure.
And they asked me the question. They said, well, why is that? And I said, well, honestly, it's because when you name a beer A Game, it can never be the second best IPA that you sell, right? It's sort of always got to be the best one you have. So as we were brewing other beers, we were learning other things and using those things to adapt the A Game recipe. And so they were like, that's an awesome brand story. Like, use that. Like that fits right into your science and engineering thing. So like, that's the brand story of that beer. And so having somebody look in from the outside and say that to you is incredibly valuable.
I guess you are wholeheartedly happy that you did it then?
Yes, there's zero regrets other than the dollars. I mean, the dollars always suck, right? We jokingly refer to things around here in terms of brewery credits, where a brewery credit is $10,000 because everything that you want to buy is like some multiple of $10,000.
Right.
So this is brewery credits. This is real money, right? So it in a brewery, of course, there's 1,000 different things to spend that amount of money on. But from a brand perspective, especially, I think about it like this. I was talking to a small brewer friend of mine, small brewer. We're not a large brewer, but like smaller than us. I was like, you've got literally everything you own invested in this business. Mm-hmm. Like, I think you need to be very sure that you're doing the right thing. Right? You got mouths to feed, you got employees, you got all this stuff, right? Like, you need to be absolutely positive that you're doing the right thing. And being super convinced of that for yourself is one thing, but, getting some validation or getting some help on that from the outside is a completely different thing. So, I view it as a very positive exercise for anybody at any scale, if for no other reason than that. Right. Mm-hmm. So you may pay somebody to tell you, you may give somebody money and they come back and they say, yep, you're doing it all right. That's awesome. We got nothing for you. Right. That's not going to happen, but like, it could happen to somebody. But if you did that, wouldn't it be nice to know that?
Yeah.
Like, it would be good to hear that, right?
Yeah.
Or if you do have some gaps to close, and you're like, I got 3 employees with families, and I got mouths to feed, and so I have a responsibility for that. So I need to be sure that Alementary is doing the right thing. And so for no other reason than that, it's recommended. But then also to get some professional help, in terms of marketing and understanding the market. Because I think in craft, we can be very insular, right? Everybody's looking at craft beer through sort of this established, lens. And these exercises kind of help to break that down and help you look at a shelf and be like, I get it. Like I was a friend of mine at Total Wine. We were playing this game. a very good friend who's an art director for Macy's Media Services. Like, guy's top of his game, right? So we took him to Total Wine. They're like, we're just going to test this out. Not even a beer guy. So he stands back from the wall and he's looking at the whole wall of craft. And he's like studying it, and he's looking. It's like maybe 3 or 4 minutes of silence. And he's like, okay, I see that one. I see that one. I see that one. The rest of this is noise.
Wow.
And you look at what he's saying and you're just like, wow. Like, when you hear that and you go, if you look at it through the eyes of a consumer who's not steeped in craft, that's their experience. And I think you can have great, marketing professionals who can help you understand that, but still keep it true to your own concept and your own brand. I guess that for me was the magic of the company we hired. Is they didn't ask us to not be us. They actually, at the end of the day, they asked us to be more us than we were being. Like, we thought we had to pull up short, and they were like, no, don't do that. Go be you, but like follow these guidelines to make sure that consumers have the best shot of buying your product and of buying it again.
And I think sometimes it's people need to be able to, like someone like you that is in that size of that many breweries are right now, that have that mentality of the punk rock, we need to do it, make it ourselves. Like, if you're going to mature in this market, you need to start doing some things that invest yourself into your brand and make sure you're doing it not just for yourself and doing it for the consumer that isn't you. Because I think a lot of people sometimes just think about those craft beer nerds that are buying. Well, that's a small percentage. And if you're going to go into that other 80 to 90% of craft beer, or just beer drinkers, or any type of drinker in general, you have to have that mentality and understand that.
One of the things they pointed out to us was we have a pretty active social media practice. And, our social media demographics skew about 40% more female than most other craft breweries that we felt we were competing against. And so they dive into that and they say, well, why is that? Like, why is your brand so much more attractive to females? Or, that is a very interesting question for someone in marketing to answer. Yeah. Right. And the answer that we heard was that the brand is viewed as being very safe, if you will. Like, it's unobjectionable. Like, we studiously avoid misogynistic imagery or names or anything like that. Like, it's just a very clean brand from a social responsibility standpoint. And so that has increased the diversity of the elementary drinkers, right? And so we were like, we didn't even know that ourselves. Like, that was the result of the study. We were like, holy cow, like, we didn't even know that was happening to our own brand. So then you realize you do have access to this audience that you didn't think you had, right? Or that you didn't know you had, just based off of some basic studies of social demographics.